Grow your practice, grow your wealth, grow your impact. Find out how to spend less time in the dental chair and more time on the things you love.
Welcome back to the Dental Wealth Podcast. With me in the studio today is always the wonderful Eric Moore.
You know, we should say always just in case I don't show up one day.
I was thinking more of what adjective am I going to give? Mr. Wonderful. I know you were talking about that at the foundation, so it just popped in my head real quick. Mr. Wonderful.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, I'm excited about this podcast. I know I was going through some just business articles this morning trying to figure out like a relevant, because we always try to bring relevancy to the podcast. And I came across a couple of articles that I want to put in front of you and we can discuss them. The first one was, I don't know if a lot of our listeners know, but Zillow got into the home flipping game. They created a company called iBuying where they basically had the Z estimates or whatnot of what a home would go for. And if it was lower than that, they would try to purchase it and then renovate it and flip it real quick. Well, the issue was with all of the volatility in the marketplace this last year and the year before that, they couldn't accurately predict what was going to happen with the housing market as far as what the pricing, because right now prices are going for an all-time high. So they had to ex-nay that. So they tried a marketing campaign. They're a billion-dollar company, and they were trying to do something, and it didn't work. Does that ever happen in the dental world?
Well, I think it's one of these things where, you know, when you say that, I think to myself, right, I can just see them around a table going, let's get rich quick. Like, we have this amazing billion-dollar company and we're doing great, but let's take our shareholders' money and put it into, you know, a risky, you know. This is absolutely asinine. Not because buying and flipping is asinine, because I don't think that's the case, but they obviously, that's not who they are. And so now that they're trying to be someone they're not. And the question is, when do you cut bait on a concept that you've invested a lot of cash into? One of the things you'll notice is that when you take great companies like a Google, right? Google came out with Google Plus and Google Glasses, right? And we can keep going on and on. The business landscape's littered with large companies who make bad decisions, right? Mm-hmm. You know, New Coke and all those types of things that make for great MBA case studies. But what ends up happening is we look at it and say, you know, sometimes what ends up happening. So I see a lot of times, for instance, like I'll see sleep dentist medicine brought in. We talked about in this podcast before as a way to solve something or a new campaign. But I would ask somebody first is, who are they as a company? I think what happens is most people don't know who they are as a dental company. And so let me explain that, I guess, in a little bit better detail. People do not know, for the most part, what drives people to their dental office. And a great question would be, you know, what makes us unique ultimately as a business? Why do people come to us? And so so when we go to those failures and the things that didn't work, it's really important for you to list out all the things you tried in your dental practice that didn't work. And it might have been hiring a position. It might have been a new service. It could have been whatever. And you write all those things out, and then you write out all the things that went well. And you got to figure out who you are and say, why do people come to us? I was talking to a doctor recently, and I said, look, I'll be honest with you. Here's why people come to you. Because you got an amazing freaking building, right? It's unbelievable. Like, it's probably the nicest building I've ever seen in dental. And so, you know, I asked him, I was like, he of course would say, well, because we do great dentistry and things like that. I was like, look, the patient doesn't know any better. Yeah. So it's what makes you unique. Well, they were coming to him for the building. And so I said, okay, well, then maybe what's worked for you is having a kick-ass building, and maybe we should replicate that, right? Maybe we should get a note. Like, if that worked, then maybe who we are, like, then don't go buy a bunch of acquisitions with piece of junk buildings that are dilapidated and garbage, because then you're killing your brand, right? It's not in line with brand. Yeah. So if your brand is, hey, we are the Taj Mahal in the area, maybe you're multi-specialist, or, whatever it is, if that's your brand, that's what made them come. That's what made people come to them. I'll give you another example. A client who, everyone says they have great culture, but this is a client who's amazing with culture, and really pours tons of money into culture and time into culture. And so I said, look, ultimately your funnel, top of your funnel, so to speak, or what's bringing people in is you're actually creating an amazing culture, which is attracting awesome people, which is then taking care of the patients. So you guys do give a unique customer experience. Now, it's important to say, like, so for instance, Ritz-Carlton, their main focus is experience. That's why people go to the Ritz-Carlton.
Yeah.
It's not why people go to a Marriott. And, even though they're owned by the same company, right? So same company, but they're different business models. So I think it's really important to understand, and I'm kind of all over the place right now, but
well, the light bulb kind of went off my head, and it was probably the first 30 episodes that we talked about this, and we used to do this in a few presentations, but it just it hit me with the movie The Founder. With McDonald's, a lot of times, this first quarter, we've been trying to, teach our clients, and you've been trying to teach your high net worth doctors to determine who they are. And to bring up The Founder, McDonald's at the time, if you guys haven't seen it, it's a great movie to go watch, endorsement, is The Founder, because McDonald's was so focused in on profitability on a hamburger and French fries and everything else that they didn't realize who they actually were. And they were a real estate company. And someone had to come in and focus in on them and say, your game needs to be here. You have the opportunity to not position yourself in the burger fry game, but in the real estate game. So if they would have figured out who they were way beforehand, they would have saved them a lot of time and energy in what they were doing. So I think it kind of speaks, when we were doing the presentation at the foundation workshop and I listened in on some of the leaders level stuff that you were doing, it's really determining that, because we see a lot, and I know you see a lot of people, they waste years because they're trying to identify who they are instead of doing that on the front end. So like Zillow is still trying to figure that out by, all right, let's try flipping homes now. Let's try this, instead of just sticking to your flywheel, just sticking to your core business principles and just duplicating, replicating, going and going and going.
Well, and I think that it's interesting that you bring up that example, because that is, one of the best case studies. And when they realized that they're a real estate corporation, McDonald's realized who they were, then it changes everything, because it really goes into, okay, our main focus is to drive profitability so that we can buy more real estate. And so how do we continue to do that? And so we increase average revenue, which increases profit per fixed cost. And so by increasing profit per fixed cost on supersizing and all that stuff that they used to do, and they still do it, they just don't call it supersizing.
Yeah.
And so what ends up happening is now all of a sudden they realized who they were, and because they realized who they were, now that they can get aligned. And then they got to push everything out that's not them. So Zillow, we all go to Zillow for information, right? It's a great place to get information. If you're looking for a home, if you're trying to find something in your area, if you want to know what your house is approximately worth, all these, a great tool. And it's a widely used tool.
Yeah.
And so now all of a sudden, when people start to not know who you are anymore, then it starts to create confusion. And I would say that, dental offices, there's not enough time put into strategy in dental, and because it's a very reactionary type of business. We open up a location, we get inside of some insurance plans, patients come in the door, we do some marketing, but I would even call a lot of the marketing that's done is reactionary. And then people come in and we take care of them, and then we recall them. We use the same texting system that everybody else uses, and then we say we're state of the art because we text people, which is not state of the art anymore, by the way. And so what ends up happening is that people start to fall into this trap of being reactionary. Then they go to conventions, which I would love to just unwind a lot of it, because they go to conventions, they look what everyone else does, and they start to copy, which is one of the worst things you can do in business, is just copy people. We see that all the time when people buying, 4, 5, 6 locations, they're just copying and they don't even know why they're doing it. There's so many things that are lost in principle. So then we go back and say that they're in the wrong paradigm. They don't even know who they are. So it's so important as a company to, even if you're one location, what frickin' makes people come to you? And, you might say it's you. Okay, it might be you. You might be a charismatic, look, you might be attractive, charismatic, you make people laugh, whatever it is, and you have great people, whatever. And look, it might be that, but then if that's the recipe, then you better duplicate that, right? And so you better duplicate people that are also fun and whatever it is that you want to duplicate in yours. If it's about, low price and being efficient, if it's about the ability to get availability, if it's about whatever it ends up being. Now, there are some people who do implant systems that are, definitely unique, and that might be the reason why people come. There are people that are different in certain areas, but you got to ask yourself, if you really want to dominate an industry and not just get by, is you got to figure out what makes you unique. Why do people come to you? And one of the greatest ways to do is just ask. This is a little bit of a tangent, but I'm going to go on it if you allow me.
Go for it.
So here's what. This is what pisses me off.
This is it. Dun dun. We need like dun dun dun.
There needs to be like dramatic music. Really.
Yeah.
When I go on a tangent, we'll just go we'll drop some
people will know, it'll be a precursor.
It'll be a dramatic music, and then what you gotta do is put tangent time or something on the video. So it's like tangent time. Finish him.
Yes, I like it. Spice it up a little bit.
So finish him. Here we go. Here's what frustrates me is what's happened is marketing companies have gotten a hold of surveys. And so what happens is when you go back to a doctor, and don't tell me it's not you, it's every one of you, because every time I talk to you and I say, look, what's going on with your surveys? We use this company and they get Google reviews for us, and their job is a bias around getting 4-star or 5-star reviews or whatever, trying to promote your Google. And that's not why I want you to do a survey. It's not about what you look like to the external world, because that's what's happened now. Most of the surveying is done by marketing companies who do not really truly care about what makes you unique. What they're trying to do is ultimately get patients driven to you, which is what that's their job and focus. But you, as a business owner, need to understand what makes you unique, why people want to come there, why they don't want to come there. And I could give a damn less whether it's on Google. I don't care about Google. This is not about Google for a moment. This is not about Facebook. This is about your organization and understanding as an organization who you are, what makes people come there, what excites them. Get feedback. And so these flipping marketing companies have taken over this, and so that every time I ask a doctor, and this is every time I ask a doctor, tell me about your surveys. Well, we have a company, we have a marketing company that just gets our surveys, and they question everybody, and they get it. Okay, if you know anything about statistics whatsoever, if you know anything about polling whatsoever, you understand that people can create questions to get the response they're looking for. Understand that. If I ask you a question, right? If I'm anti-Trump and I ask you a question, wouldn't you agree that Trump has done a poor job, I can create a bias in that question. I can manipulate the question to get the answer that I'm looking for, right? What are the 3 ways that you feel that Biden has failed as a president, right? So I'm manipulating information to make you say a certain response. That's what these companies are doing, okay? They're manipulating the questions to get a response, which sounds really good on Google. But that's not what you want. This is not about Google reviews, Facebook, anything like that. This is about you internally as an organization. If something isn't working, if you're pouring tons of cash into something just like Zillow did, and it's not working, stop doing it. If it's not getting ROI, if there's no feedback loop to tell you whether that's a good system or a bad system, you got to know those things. So I find it, I find it crazy that people are willing to give up data that can help support and grow their business so they can have a flipping Google review. Look, stop. You can encourage your patients to go on Google. That's fine. That's not hard to do. But having somebody manipulate information so that you're blind and you're flying blind and you have no idea what makes you unique is foolish. It's foolish. Finish him.
Foolish.
So sorry, there's tangent time. That wasn't even too. I didn't get too.
Yeah, that wasn't too bad.
Sometimes I get really like fired up. I didn't get too fired up on that one. I feel like
I think you get fired up because oftentimes people see this as, just show me the numbers, show me the numbers, show me the numbers, show me the numbers. When this is we see businesses take off when they know who they are.
That's right.
When they truly know, all right, when they come to you and say, this is who we are as a company, which I believe has probably rarely happened, where you've had a conversation with them and they say, this is exactly who we are. This is how we get patients. This is how we're going to expand this, and this. I don't know of a time other than maybe once or twice where you've ever come to me and said, I just talked to this doc and I was blown away by they presented who their practice is and what they want to get accomplished.
Because I believe that in dental, one of the greatest missing pieces in all of dental education is strategy, because we have a bunch of tacticians out there teaching tactical ways to do things, but no strategy. And so, there is very little strategy taught in dental. Very, very little strategy. I'm talking about almost zero strategy. And everything is tactical moves. And so what you can't imagine going to war, right? And then being like, okay, are we flanking? What are we doing? I don't know. Just roll up a bunch of tanks in there. That's what everyone else is doing. Yeah. You're like, well, hold on. What is the overall purpose of the mission? How are we going to, I was in the military. There's literally war colleges, okay, where they literally teach, war strategy, right? And you go to college to learn war strategy. Mm-hmm. So I think we need to have business war strategy sessions, where you learn strategy, because I think that what's end up happening, the reason why, because think about this. As far as I know, I don't know where Aspen sits right now, but there's not a lot of billion-dollar companies in dental. There's just not. And so you say, well, my gosh, look how many providers there are. Well, how is that the case? Look, and you got to understand. So right now they're saying dental is a $15.2 billion a year industry. It's anticipated that it's going to be a $30 billion industry within the next decade. I want to say that again. 15 billion, 30 billion. So it's going to double in the next 10 years. Now, a lot of that has to do with implants and things like that are going to push up the revenue that are coming in, the average revenue per patient. So if you understand strategy, if you have a true industry that's about to double, then you better know how to capture that game. You better know how to capture your share of that. Yeah. And it isn't going to happen through tactics. It's going to happen through strategy and understanding strategically what positions you in the marketplace. How are you positioned? What is your advantage? And then what ultimately, how do we go after that? So
what we're going to see is, and this already, based on those statistics, what we're going to see is the really successful ones are going to have this stuff down where they know exactly who they are. And the ones that are going to struggle 5 years from now, they're going to be like, oh, we're missing out on all this opportunities. Everybody's been telling me there's this opportunity. So now what we're going to do is just kind of throw stuff at the wall, just like Zillow did. Zillow was looking at a market that was really hot, and they were like, all right, we need to get on this whole flipping game. It looks like there's a lot of money in flipping. We need to do something. All right, let's create this whole company, ultimately for it to go out of business. So
well, shiny diamonds. I think people are, there's a lot of shiny diamonds. People start chasing down things that they heard you can get rich quick. I think that it's even as a quick start, you and I are quick starts, right? But I'm not I think through things. I look like I just moved to action quickly, but I'm actually thinking through things. And, the idea of just jumping at things and just, we'll just buy this, we'll buy that, we'll do that. That's how you get in trouble. Actually, it's how you become wealthy is staying the course. It's not jumping from thing to thing to thing. And you can see this in jobs. People just keep jumping. So they never actually get to, have the long-term growth in the position because they keep leaving positions. We see this all the time now. And so what ends up happening in business is that we jump to things. We start, I mean, the idea of this company, some people just keep buying real estate. They don't even know why they're buying real estate. Now, going back to that again, look, it used to make a lot of sense to buy real estate, but it depends on what you're trying to get accomplished. What's your strategy? If your strategy is to exit within the next 5 years, maybe, right? Real estate might or might not play into that depending on what your goal is with that business. And there's so much to do with that. So sometimes real estate plays in, sometimes it doesn't. Real estate is not going to perform as far as how quickly you can increase the valuation of your practice. I can increase the valuation of your practice so quickly. So if you can take, let's say, a $200,000 down payment and use that $200,000 down payment to put into marketing and double your revenues, then you're going to get a heck of a lot higher return than you are through real estate. So, and then of course you can take the return and put it in real estate if you want. So I think that really it's this idea of like, who are we? What makes us great? All right. What is the market doing? What makes us unique in the market? Right? Based on that, where should we invest capital? These types of decisions have to be thought through. And I think that Zillow obviously made a mistake. We see large organizations make this all the time. That's the misconception. Is because they're big, they don't make mistakes. Mm-hmm. That's just not true. It's still a bunch of people who are sitting in a room. It's funny. I was talking to the CEO of a very, very large billion-dollar company, and he and I were talking. And he said, Eric, he said, it's interesting because the boards of all these giant companies are just filled with people who are imposters. He was like, he said, hell, everyone I know on a board has a imposter syndrome. They're like, how did I get here, right? Yeah. I don't deserve to be here or whatever it is. And so, there's a boards of every company filled with people who are just trying to make decisions and trusting their gut. Yes. And, somebody walked in a room somewhere and convinced everybody they should start flipping real estate. But it's a whole different business, right?
And I would say if you're going to be that, so like we always say, you're going to swing and miss sometimes. If you're going to do it, at least have your home base be okay. A lot of times we see people that, for example, Sears, they'll go try to acquire another company when they're already going out of business. So Zillow had the ability when they were a successful company, they built it up right and they were able to take a chance. We see in the dental world where they haven't really been too successful and then sleep apnea, sedation, that's going to fix my practice. And it ends up not working out. And ultimately they put a bunch of money into something when if they just would have focused on the core focus of their practice, they would have been okay. And we see that from time to time. So I think overall, the message of this podcast is identify who you are, identify it, multiply it, and take advantage of the marketplace.
Identify, multiply. You need like one more of those, right? It's got to be powers of three. Identify, powers of three. Multiply, repeat, right?
Solidify.
Solidify. Identify, multiply, solidify. I like it. I like it. Yo, that's right. You can write that down.
Quote it. Put it in the office.
Quotable.
Well, I want to thank you, Eric, for joining us today. We're going to have another great podcast next week, so stay tuned. Always like, subscribe, share with other doctors. We got great feedback. A lot of doctors had listened to this prior to our foundation workshop last week, and they got a lot of great information. So if you're out there, listen to it, subscribe it, share it with people, and we look forward to seeing you next time.